At CHM. So these 12 years are here for the reason that you are here and for the reason that our committee is here. So let's identify, recognize, thank the members of the Out at CHM committee. Please stand up, the Out at CHM committee. I also would like to thank the people whose generous donations made this event possible and the year of programs possible. First, we thank Exelon for their support this season. Exelon. We also want to support Robert Cole and Clark Pellet for their years of support for the Out series. And they're both here. Thank you, Robert and Clark. And now please welcome tonight's lead presenter, Precious Davis.
Good evening. How are we doing tonight? Thank you so much to everyone coming out tonight to this first installation to the Out at CHM. I first want to thank the Chicago History Museum for having me tonight. This is an esteemed honor for me, and I am so glad to be present here tonight speaking to all of you. So can we give it up for the Chicago History Museum? I stand before you today as a representative and as a testament. I humbly speak on behalf of the tremendous and beautiful trans community of which I am a part, and joyfully give testimony by my very presence here before you to the glorious new heights of trans visibility we are in the process of achieving. Through media, through pop culture, yes. And yes, if you are feeling it, snap, live, preach me on. I'm a trans evangelist, and tonight you are in the Church of Precious Davis. So I ask that you participate, okay? Can we do that? Can we snap? I joyfully give testimony by my very presence here before you to the glorious new heights of trans visibility we are in the process of achieving. Through media, through pop culture, through the remembering and telling of our true histories, trans visibility and resilience is shining bright in Chicago today. Such unprecedented opportunity, self-awareness, and emergence into the broader social consciousness is not a circumstance to take lightly. The possibility of this moment is a gift, a legacy given to us by those whose lives were lived with authenticity, purpose, and unimaginable resilience at a time when visibility more often meant danger than empowerment. Even though society's media microscope is currently zeroed in on the transgender community more than ever before, we must remind everyone, including ourselves, that this doesn't mean that the trans community is something new. We must remind ourselves that some of what we're seeing is a mere two-dimensional visual mimicry, cultural appropriation, or attempts to tell our story by those who don't actually identify or locate themselves within. Even amidst our forced strides, we still face setbacks, career roadblocks, misrepresentations, pervasive stereotypes, inappropriate and invasive questions from even the most well-meaning allies, and of course, the ever-present threat of danger to our lives and livelihoods. Even within our own LGBT community, although it continues to promote itself with the acronym of inclusivity, I'm obliged to point out how quickly the T is all too often forgotten in favor of mainstream agendas. For these reasons, and has been the case throughout our trans history, it is up to us, from within the trans community, to be our own heralds and storytellers, to be our own leaders and organizers, our own healers and architects, to demonstrate a more loving world by first loving ourselves, to show proof once more of our trans resilience, our ability to bounce right back into the fullest state of resolve and dignity, no matter the adversity we face. We must seize this moment in history where the eyes of the camera and the curiosity of the world is upon us, and collectively, we are telling our story. We are naming our place in history and claiming our space in the future that we create with every breath. Tonight, we will tell our story. Tonight, we will evoke the great trans resilient spirit. Tonight, we will listen to the wisdom of our elders as well as the hope of younger generations. First, we welcome Gloria Allen. We welcome Gloria Allen, whose truth and compassion shines brightly through the loving care and mentorship she bestows each day upon the youth at Chicago's LGBTQ Resource Center, the Center on Halsted. Her resilience and, more importantly, her heart deserve a round of applause from all of us. We also honor the great history of Chicago's Miss Continental pageant, which for 34 years has crowned beautiful trans women from across the country as legendary goddesses in our midst. We welcome former Miss Continental, Miss Kelly Lauren. Kelly just celebrated her 26th anniversary of winning that pageant. Gloria and Kelly, we celebrate you, and we thank you for being with us here tonight. As we honor the past, we also give great esteem to those who are rippling the tides of change in our Transmopolitan present. Tonight, we will hear from the Executive Director and Founder of Trans Tech Social Enterprises, Angelica Ross. Ms. Ross's passion for social entrepreneurship, leadership development, and community organizing inspired her to create an organization dedicated to empowering trans people with all of the technological skills and tools necessary to best represent themselves and to be leading competitors in today's complex job market. Let's have a round of applause for Angelica Ross. We also salute Owen Daniel McCarter, founding member and project attorney for the Transformative Justice Law Project, founder of the Translating Identities Conference, and tireless advocate for making legal services available to trans people who have been disenfranchised by the system due to class or economics. Owen has helped countless trans individuals change their legal documents to actually reflect who they are, and is passionate about prison abolition and an anti-oppression framework, as well as serving poverty-centralized communities. Thank you, Owen, for all that you do and for being here tonight. As these truly outstanding representatives of the trans community demonstrate, our great city of Chicago is well positioned to be a leading voice in the liberatory movement that is sweeping our nation. And this legacy, like I said once again, is nothing new. This year, we saw Chicago's own Alexandra Billings, who was first runner-up to Kelly Lauren the year she won Miss Continental, showing her trans resilience as she took the stage in Los Angeles to accept a Golden Globe Award for her portrayal of Davina in the Amazon hit series Transparent. Billings is an unapologetic, openly HIV-positive woman, trans woman, who started her career right here in Chicago at the Baton nightclub. Billings has talked openly about her pre-transition period and what it was like coming to Chicago in the 1970s as a gender non-conforming teenager dressed in women's clothing. She recounts vividly an episode in which she was thrown against a cop car for not wearing 2 or more articles of male clothing. It wasn't until 1973 that Chicago abolished its anti-cross-dressing laws, first instated in World War II. This law required any individual to have at least 3 articles of clothing that matched the sex that they were assigned at birth. Citizens who refused to comply were arrested. Billings' experience illustrates perfectly the essence of trans resilience, having undergone the humiliation and violence of a time in which social stigma, mindsets of oppression, and systematic structures attempted to silence and stifle her identity, and responded by going to become an award-winning Hollywood actress. Yes, that's amazing. In 1990, Joan Jett Black took the spotlight at an ACT UP demonstration and announced, "It's about time Chicago had a queen." Soon after, Joan Jett Black filed to run for mayor against Richard M. Daley. She campaigned on Michigan Avenue, going to stores, shaking hands, and even rode in the St. Patrick's Day parade. Sadly, Black did not win the mayoral election that year against Daley. But, like a true queen, that did not faze her. In 1992, Joan became the first drag queen to announce her candidacy for the President of the United States. Smuggled into the 1992 Democratic National Convention, she applied her makeup in the bathroom and emerged in a star-spangled red, white, and blue outfit on the floor of Madison Square Garden and proclaimed, "If a bad actor can be president, why not a badass drag queen?" Sadly, Black did not win that election. But she continues to be a visible gender nonconforming activist and currently lives in San Francisco and is continuing to do the work. Social and political trans activism has been a key thread that has moved trans visibility forward and created pathways of upward mobility for a community which faces unemployment rates twice the national average, or for a trans woman of color, 4 times the national average. For over 14 years, Lois Bates served as an advisor, trainer, and health manager at Howard Brown Health Center. Lois served on the HIV Prevention Planning Group as well as the Chicago Area Ryan White Services Planning Council while she was still with us. It is individuals like Lois Bates, Shannon Parker, and Bon Wade who care for our homeless youth and those impacted by HIV/AIDS who create sustainable, adequate resources so that our trans brothers and sisters could achieve a quality standard of living. And we are forever in their debt. It is their trans resilience and compassion that continues to shine love and light on our community. And we honor and we thank them, as well as the countless others whose names and contributions are lost to history. It is with great pride and fellow feeling that I position myself amongst the inspired and inspirational ranks of Chicago's trans community. Even though I was born in Nebraska, my education, my career, my rebirth as a trans executive woman of legacy have all been located in and influenced by the wonderful city of Chicago. I'm going to share a little of my story that brought me here to this day. I'm so glad that I'm able to honor and to love the trans resilience in our community as well in myself. Growing up in Omaha, Nebraska, I was never exposed to transgender individuals. I understood that I was different, but I had no language or context to make sense of how I felt. Through the hurt and challenges I faced through my adolescence, however, I eventually became intimately familiar with a beautiful insight that would help me in my journey through gender, and that is that transformation is just not possible, it is inevitable. We are always changing, blossoming anew with each passing season. And I learned that it's up to each of us individuals to decide what form we will emerge from our individual cocoons. I was adopted by my grandparents at the age of 5 under the name Nathaniel Paul Hobart, Jr. I remember the feelings I had in the courtroom on the day I legally changed my name to Nathaniel Paul Davis. It was exciting, and it felt right, but I also felt a deep sense of loss. I knew that in order for me to be adopted, I had to be given up, abandoned. My father had left my mother, and now my mother had left me. But I tried not to linger on that feeling. Instead, I looked forward to my future as a Davis. Even at the age, I began to understand the power that exists in a name. Names speak to identity. Names speak to origin. Until I left behind the last name Hobart and the suffix Junior, there was still a part of me that was connected to my birth father, although I had never met him. Shortly after the adoption and the name change were finalized, I found out my birth father had passed from a seizure due to a gunshot wound to the head. So in an instant, that entire piece of my identity was fully and permanently cut off from me. But again, I chose not to be made less by my loss. I chose to embrace my rebirth into something new. Through what would be the first of many transitions, I was fully and completely a Davis. One of my first memories as a young Davis child was at school when I was in kindergarten. I was in the morning class and had left my book bag in a cubby in my classroom that day. I went back that afternoon, bless you, Church of One of my first memories as a young Davis child was at school when I was in kindergarten. I was in the morning class and I left my book bag in a cubby in my classroom that day. I went back that afternoon to pick it up, escorted by my grandmother, who was white, and my grandfather, who was black. All the white kids at Harmon Elementary went to school in the morning, and all of the black children went in the afternoon. So when I arrived to pick up my backpack, I was met by a room of brown faces staring at me like I was out of place, or unusual, or wrong in some way. I saw all of them staring at my grandparents, wondering, what could Nathaniel be doing with a white woman and a black man together? And why was I stepping foot into the afternoon session? I knew I was one of the only people of color who attended classes in the morning, and I knew that my parents wanted me in that session for a reason. But I never really knew why until that moment. Somehow this was the first moment that I realized I was not like the black kids or the white kids. And although I didn't have a word for what I was then, that day was the major establishing place in my understanding of race and my unique position as a biracial or transracial person. It was one of the first moments I felt truly, profoundly different and knew that I wasn't normal, which is now a term I put in quotations because who's to describe what is normal? But really, I thought it was weird. I was shorter than everybody, I was left-handed, I had nappy curly hair, I was adopted, and my family was poor. We lived in a rundown neighborhood where public housing was the norm. I remember sharing in a sort of communal understanding that we were in a different world, a full level below the wealth of those living in the suburbs. One way or another, my grandparents navigated the economic hardship of raising a household of 7 and somehow kept our family afloat. And today I thank them for it. It was the same for every family on the block I lived on for the most part. One or both of the parents worked multiple jobs to put food on the table. And this meant many homes with kids taking care of themselves while parents worked the night shift. I remember being resentful that I didn't have parents around when we came home from school to make dinner and to take care of us. My 3 sisters, my brothers, and I did our best to take care of ourselves and occupy our time with games, bonding, and wreaking terror on the neighborhood. It was hard for us dealing with the fact that our parents really weren't present in our lives. When I was in 3rd grade, my sister started hanging around with twins who lived around the block from our house. Weekly, the girls would pick up my sister for church that was really close to some blocks from where we lived. Thankfully, the Shropshire family would pick up my sister up for services, and eventually, I was excited to score an invitation to come along. Victory Church was my first exposure to the very different experience of what I consider to be a life of privilege. The pastor of the church at the time was white, and his beautiful wife would dance in front of the service in the most beautiful flowing dresses, and she always addressed the congregation with the utmost sensitivity and reverence. She often cried while speaking. Dramatic, huh? I remember immediately identifying with her spirit and energy as she greeted members of the congregation. her presence and leadership at functions in the church, and the love felt in her hugs and the passion in her eyes. Not only was I enamored by the pastor's wife, but by the splendor of the facility. It had a full gym, a beautiful sanctuary, and even a separate room for vending machines. Then there were the activities I could partake in when my parents weren't around. I was involved in Royal Rangers, which is like a Christian version of Boy Scouts. I think that's funny. I sang in the choir, I ministered in the drama group, volunteered weekly to clean up the church, participated in bus outreach program that happened every Saturday, taught Sunday school, and even went on several mission trips to Mexico City. Those were my first years I received training in the nonprofit world and formally. It was a gift that came to me naturally. I came to this place where I started building relationships with individuals who actually made me feel valued. I didn't feel that important at home or at school because of the abusive situations that happened in both places. Growing up, I was continually locked in my room for long periods of time and always was compared to my brother, the football player, who was congenitally diagnosed with ADD. I never wanted to play with any sport. I wanted to be the cheerleader and the person dressing all of the dolls. People at school would always continually ask me if I was gay long before I knew what to say or what that even meant. I had my first actual sexual experience around the 8th grade with a boy in the neighborhood. We peed in a plant together and we thought it was gay. However, after the plant experience, I wouldn't come to understand and identify with the term gay until my freshman year of high school. I met all of the people in the theater and music department. I immediately joined the choir. I immediately joined the choir and auditioned for all of the musicals. I had to be there amongst my new home of glory. I was still having difficulties at home with my grandfather, who took custody of me after a messy divorce with my grandmother. Then, the years of sexual abuse that occurred in our home came into the open. Later on, forgiving someone for sexually abusing me was to be one of the most liberating points in my life, having the realization that I was not a victim, but a survivor. But around this time, yes, stats for that, survivors of sexual assault. But around this time, I started getting bolder with my gender play. I would leave my house in the morning in tennis shoes and change into high heels on the way. I mocked the shoes from my grandfather's girlfriend. I also became the first male-identified person in the history of the JROTC in the state of Nebraska to wear a dress to the military ball. At that time, no one would really say anything about how I was dressing except my grandfather. I wore Hot Topic clothing that consisted of pleather pants, glitter in my hair, and tight shirts from Gazooks. Anything to make me stand out from the crowd. Shortly after that, I became involved in a new youth group at Eagles Nest Worship Center, which invited me to a Pentecostal youth conference in Aurora, Illinois, my first interaction with Chicago. I will never forget this moment in my entire life. The youth pastor called me up from the very back of the church in front of everyone. He then screamed into my ears a fierce exorcism. I bind the foul spirit of homosexuality out of you. You are not a man. You are a man, not a woman. You are a man. I bind the foul spirit of homosexuality out of you. I woke up later on a kitchen floor with 4 women praying over me. That would be the beginning of a process that went on to repeat itself for the next 4 years. I became more and more involved at Eagles Nest Worship Center and tried tirelessly to throw myself into my faith as a man of God and trust that God would take this burden of my sexuality and gender expression away from me. All the while, everyone else around me seemed to think they knew what I was and how they could fix me. I would go to these camps and retreats 3 times a year and would be instructed to repent and beg for God's forgiveness and mercy on my life. By the end, I would feel like I had been saved and changed, but then I would come home and realize, no, I still want to kiss cute guys who wear high heels. But I really fought it. I kept on fighting because I wanted so badly to fit in and to find my place in the church and to be a leader and build that community. I was mentored by several very masculine figures in the church during that time, following their instruction and constant corrections. But they told me to get my hair cut, to wear different shoes, to switch my watch from one wrist to another. Then I started getting even more involved in the youth group. The youth pastor came to my school and told me this was a good place for me to step up, so I became the worship leader in the choir. Meanwhile, I was going to the underage gay club and dancing the night away on the weekends. So I was still navigating that space at church. It was also a part of me that finally began to really feel like I didn't care who knew anymore. Eventually, there was some controversy because some people from my high school started coming to church and ratted me out for not being a man of God at school, where I basically was out to everyone. I was questioned, and this time I just didn't have it in me to repent anymore. I was sick and tired of fighting, so I confirmed their suspicions. I was asked to turn in my tambourine and step down as the worship leader. Shortly after that, I ended up going to live full-time with a family that eventually adopted me from my grandfather. They were foster parents who happened to know me from church and took an active interest in my development and safety as a young person. They instead switched me to a new school that was closer to their part of town, predominantly a white area. I was now living with a white family and going to school with mostly white kids, and it was a total new life, another new start. I had somehow thought that being adopted again and living with another family was going to be some kind of grand solution, and it ended up having its own problems and challenges. But it was a fresh start, and it was the place where I cultivated a lot of my new identity. I got back into music at theater at my new school and started hanging out with people who supported me and believed in me. I had opportunities to put on makeup or wear high-heeled boots to concerts or cast parties, and I was supported and encouraged by my friends. The safety and trust I had in them gave birth to the resilience and confidence that continues to serve me today. Finding a way to foster a community in my theater and gay worlds while still making it to church in the morning would teach me an early lesson about intersectionality and navigating spaces. During high school, I went to a training retreat about social justice called Anytown. I learned about all of the isms of oppression. This was huge for me because it was really one of the first times in my life that I had the aha moment realizing that this was all systematic oppression that was the problem, not me. I learned about ableism, faithism, and heterosexism. So many isms. I realized how pervasive oppression really is and made a choice to do my best not to be a part of it anymore. I had finally found a community in which to discuss the things I was curious about and to actually coexist in the world. The experiences I had that sustained me through high school and still mean so much to me today. One of the people who mentored me was a girl named Nakiru, who told me how special I was, the worth that I had, and how great the potential I had in the work of social justice. I had finally felt that my voice had worth and power, that my story had value. I realized the systematic oppression of my Pentecostal faith was what had been unveiling my identity all along. I realized that systems should not control my life, but that the finding of my own happiness should dictate my path. I later went back to that camp as a counselor and participated in many of their programs, leading workshops, and began using my voice and story to help others. From there, I quickly learned that this was to be my life cause. By my senior year of high school, the pastor of my church gave me the last chance ultimatum to repent. This time I said, "Don't worry, I'm not ever coming back." I was determined to start a new independent life. I was going to be successful on my own, find my own voice, leave everything I ever knew, and begin my own story. I wanted to start college, where I was cast in a play to act in drag as the fairy nymph in A Midsummer Night's Dream. This was significant as it was a chance for me to explore my gender in a more legitimate sense rather than just halfway dressing up at a cast party. Looking back, it's funny that these strangers saw it in me long before I did. They were basically saying to me, "Don't you know what you are?" I was still identifying as a gay man at the time. I didn't have a label for liking girl stuff. No one had ever sat me down and explained what the word transgender meant. 1 year in Iowa, enough. And then I decided to move on to greener pastures and return back to Nebraska. I transferred to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, which welcomed me with open arms. There was an LGBT group on campus with people identifying as queer, which I had never heard was a thing that people did. I got in a fight the first week I heard someone say queer. I said, that's a terrible word. But then they explained to me that queer is a state of life, and it's actually progressive. Then I ended up at a gay bar downtown. I remember seeing the first drag queen in my life performing I'm Every Woman. It was one of the first times I was ever exposed to drag. And I remember thinking, ha, I can do that. That night, the MC announced a competition for first-time drag queens called Beauty and the Beast. My friends basically forced me to sign up, so I did. Let me tell you, I certainly came bucking out of the gate. I felt on fire. The glamour, the hair, the lights, and the stage and the beauty. I fell in love with drag, and thus Precious Jewel was born. Through performing in drag in Nebraska, I again had the experience of building community once again, of bringing people from my college to the gay club when they would probably never have stepped in there any otherwise. I was again finding intersectionality and community at every turn. I also took my first LGBT literature class, which introduced me to even more aspects of queer history and theory that I had been totally unaware of. I never learned anything about Stonewall or any part of the history of the transgender community until I took this LGBT class at 20 years old. It certainly sparked a trigger in me. I felt so strongly that I needed to be a part of creating space for queer people to live, to thrive, and to come together. After studying abroad in Paris and London, seeing all the art, cabaret performers in the nude on the main stage, Elphaba, the musical, performed by a black woman, it was so amazing seeing this liberal, amazing energy. I knew this other crazy world existed and I had to go someplace bigger. I knew I wanted to see more outside of Nebraska. So I left my full ride at the University of Nebraska to come to Columbia College, Chicago, which is basically $100,000 a semester. Don't say that, I work there now. During my first week there, my advisor asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I wanted to perform at Chicago Pride. The very next year, I was on a float in the Pride Parade performing on the main stage. I continued to study queer history and theory, liberal education, and performance theory, all along while working as a full-time entertainer, working in the nightclubs, trying to establish myself as a solo entertainer on the Boys Town Strip. I was barely surviving. I was naive, but I was passionate. And I knew that one way or another, by God, I was going to make something of myself. Even this radical liberal college didn't know what to do with me and sent me to the senior internship at a queer theater company telling the director, with this kid we don't really know what to do with. I met her, she met me finally and said, what's the big confusion? She finally laid it out to me. She said, girl, you're queer. That was Sarah Carestas, by the way. It was a relief, but at the time, I still had these grand designs of being the queen, being famous, being the most glamorous showgirl to ever grace a stage. Eventually, this reached a pinnacle of frenzy after I graduated and had the full freedom of summer to dive into the nightlife and all the sex, drugs, and rock and roll I could ever ask for. I became lost in the illusion and fantasy of that world and literally started to become unhinged. I ended up realizing that I needed to leave Chicago and come home. I needed to return to my origin. We all have that friend who's left Chicago with that wind that blows you in and then blows you right back out. I did a series of photo shoots with my dear friend Candace, exploring connections between my identity and the land. Being reborn and baptized as something other than a gay man and drag, I became a queer creature of fluid gender identity. After the first shoot, I was in my neither disheveled boy persona or my glossy big head campy drag performance. I was just me, a feminine, strong figure, a harlequin in sense, embodying so many worlds and identities. I finally saw what I looked like when I was truly focused, energetically at peace, and connected to myself internally and externally. After my time in Nebraska, I knew it was time to return to my home, Chicago, with a sense of clarity and purpose. I had released Precious Jewel the drag queen and had begun to discover Precious Davis, the trans evangelist, queer activist, and performance artist. but I wasn't sure how and when to introduce my full-time transition into womanhood. In my time as a showgirl working on the strip in Boys Town, I had seen so many trans and gender variant youth on the street. Many of them were homeless youth of color. They would watch me run into my gigs and watch me perform from the window facing the street. Many nights after my performances, I would go out and love on these young people and take pictures with them. I remember the abandoned feeling I felt as a young age. I did not wish that on anyone else. Soon thereafter, a racist transphobic onslaught began occurring in Boys Town. It was a crusade by all the gay white men to get rid of the streets and all of the crime happening, which was blamed on the young people who partook in community-based services from the LGBT Resource Center located in the neighborhood. I wanted to bring my social justice background to bear on this debate. So I attended the local town hall meeting, but was shocked and disgusted by the unparalleled racism, greed, and class spewing from the mouth of these white business owners. It was at that very moment that I knew it was time to use my power for building community and to create safe spaces more than just twirling in a bar. I wanted to help these young people. I wanted to help my community. I found a job working at the center on Halstead. My first week on the job, I was still hesitant to fully present my trans femme identity as Precious, wearing mostly boy clothes and my natural hair. One day I said to a coworker, "I wish I could be here as Precious." Then he said, "Girl, you can. Why can't you?" I realized this was my chance to finally be the woman that I had looked up to my entire life. My teachers and preachers' wives, striding the halls with a steady click of authority and glamour, and heels and skirts and all of the trappings of my beautiful femme identity. Finally, I was fully embodied in my identity as a trans woman of color. During my time while working at the center in Halstead, I facilitated groups with trans and gay youth of color, held discussions on identity, healthy relationships, safe sex, and many other relevant topics. I coordinated community outreach to LGBT youth, organized HIV prevention efforts, and planned fabulous events for all of the young people to enjoy and mingle with one another. Since then, I've gone to speak at conferences and universities around the country, been included in the Windy City Times 30 Under 30, been included in the prestigious Trans 100 list, and this year transitioned into my new exciting role as the Assistant Director of Diversity Recruitment Initiatives at Columbia College, Chicago. I truly feel my journey in Chicago has come full circle. And now I stand here as a staff member of the college that educated me, giving a speech about the trans community that inspired me, and looking forward to all of the future and more beautiful transformations. Everything has led to this moment, this chance to tell my story, as a vital reminder that no matter what hardships we face as individuals or as a community, we can be resilient and achieve anything. We together constructing a massive, complex, multi-layered, ever-changing collective cocoon can decide in what form we must emerge and merge. Let's choose beauty. Let's choose love. Let's choose trans resilience.